Everybody, my name is Mike Geig. Sorry for the distraction here. If you are experiencing any issues, please reload or refresh the page. And if anyone in chat mentions they're having some issues, tell them to reload, refresh the page. Twitch is acting really weird right now, so I do apologize for that. If you're having any issues, this will be recorded and posted later, so I do apologize for any problems you might have. But chat has been restarting and blocking people, and the video seems to be cutting out. So I don't really know what's going on, but hopefully everything smooths out and we have smooth sailing from here on out. So, okay. So today our topic is basically scene composition. But before I go into all that, I'm going to do my classic plug here. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, please feel free to contact us on Twitch, or not Twitch, Twitter. I'm scatterbrained today. On Twitter, at Unity3D, at Mike Geig, which is me, at Will Goldstone, and at the Ant Ranch. So, sorry, it's your classic Monday today, and I'm just feeling a bit scatterbrained. Okay. So today we're talking about cinematic composition, and the stuff we're going to kind of look at today isn't really new. If you've been following along with my live sessions, nothing here is really going to like blow your mind as far as new things. What I really want to do is I want to talk about how we can take things that we already have, maybe stuff that we already know how to do in Unity, or assets from the asset store or our own assets, and put them together to achieve kind of an in-game cinematic experience. So one of the common things I hear a lot of the questions that I get from people a lot of times is things like, you know, animation, things like scene composition, and things like special effects like slow motion and stuff like that. And a lot of people who come from maybe more traditional tool backgrounds, like maybe used to working directly with DirectX or XNA or OpenGL programming, they know these tasks to be fairly difficult. Very difficult to achieve the right effect, the right timing, the right camera angles in this, that, and the next. So what I really wanted to do is I wanted to kind of do a lesson today that just talks about those three things and to see what it is we can really achieve. And my inspiration for today's lesson is really classic action films, right? And everyone knows action films when the hero is walking away from a car or a building or anything of the like, and the building explodes behind them or the car explodes behind them, and everything goes in super slow motion, and you can see the debris and everything, and these $1 million explosive effects. And everyone, you know, that's just kind of a classic example of the action genre. And when I was thinking of cinematics, when I was thinking of, hey, let's build a cinematic effect, that is of course the first thing that came to mind. And actually you may have seen this picture before. This is not the first time I've posted this picture, but it just really sort of applies, so I figured I would post it again. And so yeah, so we're going to talk about how we can take the things that are available to us and build these. One of the other ways this sort of came about is I had someone ask me what tools would I use if I wanted to build like cutscenes, right? If I wanted to, you know, record some animation, some effect, and then play it in Unity. And I thought to myself, well, I really wouldn't use a third-party tool. I wouldn't use some 3D modeling program. I wouldn't use some video processing program. I'd probably just use Unity, and I'd build a scene that contained my cinematic effect and just play it, right? To my mind, that would save me a lot of work. It would allow me to reuse the same assets, and you know, it would allow me to keep my workflow all for one very specific tool. So yeah, let me close that up there. Let's see here. I'm just looking through chat. Again, I'll be looking through chat, so sorry if I stop and I read. Right, cool guys, don't look at explosions. All right, so I'm gonna try something new here. I'm gonna show you what our finished product is gonna look like, and then I'm gonna show you how I built it, and I'm gonna show you all the assets that I used and the scripts that I used and everything like that. Now, there is a sound component to this because I am using an explosion. So if you're listening along, I have no idea how loud this is gonna be. So I'm warning you right now, I have no idea how loud this is going to be, so if you're wearing headphones or something, you may want to protect your ears. It may be quiet, or you may not hear it at all. I really don't know, but this is the effect. So what we have here is obviously Ethan walking away from the car. It's going to cut to slow-mo as the car explodes, and that's pretty much the cinematic effect that I wanted to achieve. Now, it's real short, right? I do have a thing for explosions. Yes, I love my explosions. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. But yeah, so it's a real short cinematic, right? This isn't like a really long, complex live session today. I just really want to kind of just show you guys a new way of looking at stuff. So this may not take up the whole hour, or it might, or maybe you'll have questions and it will go longer than an hour, but it's a short little cinematic to kind of prove the point that we can build cinematics in Unity. It's not always just completely games, and we can do all of this stuff while staying within staying in game, right? I know for me, and this is from when I was a kid and stuff like that, I would watch the cinematic of a game and it would look beautiful and super high polished rendered, and I was like so jazzed to play the game, and then I'd get into the game and it looked like garbage, and I was always just so let down. And so, to me, staying in-game for all our cinematic effects, all our cinema, all our narration, all our story plots and stuff like that, is better because it provides consistent level of expectation. And so I just kind of wanted to show how we might achieve that. Okay, so yeah, I did turn the audio boost off so that the explosion wasn't deafening. So it sounds like it was good. Okay, perfect. I don't mind that it's quiet. You guys can always just make it as loud as you want yourselves. So let me load up my sample scene here, which is basically just this scene without some of the other stuff in it. And let's talk about what I have. So I have not made anything for this. Another purpose to this video is to show you how we can build all sorts of stuff, even if we're not maybe artistically inclined, maybe if we don't have the time to make all the stuff that we need. Basically, we can utilize the asset store, we can utilize a lot of things available to us to make our games very rich and full of multimedia without necessarily having a big team. So let's look at what I have here. So the first thing I have, and this is a little misleading because we see this just this little intersection here, but really what I have is this huge world here. So the first asset that I'm using is a cityscape, which is on the asset store. So all I did is I just went to the asset store and I searched for city. And I'll just show you exactly how I found these, because it's not like I had these collected or anything. I was like, hey, I want to do an exploding car scene, so let's type in some assets. So I just typed in city and I found this modular street pack. So this is the first asset, which is available right here on the asset store. That gave me a lot of the stuff, a lot of the props and everything that I needed, because I knew I wanted streets and trees and stuff like that. I wanted it to look like, look like a scene from a movie. In my mind, our hero or whatever just got done with a high-speed chase and parked the car haphazardly in an intersection and is just walking away from it when it explodes. So this is the first asset that I used. Next, I knew I needed an explosion, and I know Unity has a lot of built-in explosions, especially in the sample assets and stuff, but I really didn't want to use those because I just want to kind of branch out a little bit. So the very next thing I did is I just typed in explosion. And luckily, there's a ton of explosions available to us, and I went ahead with this detonator explosion right here because it was free, and free is my favorite number. So I just went ahead and grabbed this because, it certainly works for me. And then finally, I knew that I needed the car, and I knew I needed a model to walk away, and I knew that our Ethan model, which is provided by Unity, is wearing sunglasses, which was a big part of it. Obviously your action hero has to be wearing sunglasses because that's just part of the uniform to be an action hero. And so I knew that our sample assets had a lot of that stuff. So I just typed in sample, and here we have our Unity sample assets. Which has our Ethan character, has a car. I could have had an exploding plane too if I really wanted to. Originally I was going to have the plane crash behind Ethan as he was walking, but I decided with the exploding car instead. And so that's kind of what we have. So I basically just downloaded all of those assets and have them available to me in my scene. So yeah, so we can leave the asset store there. So if you're interested in following along, or if you're interested in trying this later, those are the assets that I used. The only premium one were these streets, but honestly, with all of the stuff that comes in it, I thought it was totally worth it. but yeah, but your mileage may vary. Maybe you want to do a beach, maybe you want to do whatever, or maybe you don't want to do explosions at all. Maybe you want to try something completely different. That's entirely up to you. Let's see here. I'm just reading chat real quick here, sorry. That's correct. So, as was pointed out by Dan Mobile, in the asset store, there's a button where you can just re-import all the things that you've purchased and downloaded. So, yeah, so that's there. Anyway. Okay, so let's talk about what we have right now. So, what we have so far is just the sample scene from the street assets, and there's actually a lot of it that you can explore and check out. But ultimately, I just wanted a street corner. So, you know, I'm sure the assets are great and all that, but I really just wanted the corner of an intersection. And then we have our car, and the car here is from the sample assets. There's nothing on it; it's just a car. And so that's really what we have. Is we have this mesh for the city and the mesh for the car, and the car is just sort of placed haphazardly, and we're going to utilize that. So that wasn't by mistake. I actually placed the car like that specifically because I wanted to give off a specific look. And in my mind, based off how the car looked and everything, in my mind, it was in Europe. Maybe England or something like that. And so I wanted Ethan to come out of the right-hand side of the car as opposed to the left-hand side of the car that he would have gotten out of in the United States. So just that was a little bit of a tidbit for you. I actually did put quite a bit of thought into this. So maybe one of the most important parts of scene composition, especially when doing cinematics, is the camera. And if you watched my video on working with the camera, my live lesson on the camera, or maybe if you saw some of the camera learn tutorials or anywhere else, you'll know that you'll know how the camera behaves, and the camera kind of acts like a real camera would, so we can get a lot of distortion and depth of field and stuff like that. So, for instance, and we have our little camera preview down here, which might be a bit small for you all, but here's our standard camera. I haven't moved it; it's still at the 0, 1, -10, but there's a lot of effects we can achieve even with the camera. Like if I wanted it to be sort of a wackier scene, sort of comedic or kind of an unreal, what I can really do is I can bring my camera far in, right? And I can increase the field of view and really get sort of like a fisheye lens, sort of, you know, crazy distorted way of looking at this. And so, I mean, and this behaves just like kind of like a real camera, right, where we can get a lot of distortion effects and everything by bringing the camera close and putting a wide field of view on there. I can also make things much more realistic by taking my camera very far away and narrowing my field of view and making all the lines kind of, oops, it would help if I made it look at the car, wouldn't it? Make the lines and everything more sharp, a little less distorted, things like that. So we can use, I'm sorry, I'm reading chat here. Because everyone's talking about what side of the street they drive on. So we can use the camera as a large part of the effect that we want to achieve, okay? And that's basically what I'm getting at, is when you're dealing with scene composition, you really have to determine how it is that you want the scene to be presented. In my case, I wanted everything to seem rather sharp and rather fast, so to speak, and fairly accurate, so I opted to bring the camera far away and zoom my field of view in by bringing the number down, which will remove a lot of the distortion and things like that, and will really emphasize the background. If I didn't want to do that, if I wanted the background to be small, if I really wanted a great depth of field, what I would do is I'd have a wide field of view. So anyway, that's more along the lines of some stuff that you learn if you ever study like photography and things like that, but the basics or the concepts are pretty much the same. So with that in mind, what I had in mind for my camera is I'm going to place it at 1.85 to bring it up just a little bit, and then a position of -9.5. And what I want to do is I want to do a field of view of about 41, which is 41 is smaller than the standard 60, which means there's going to be less distortion, and the background is going to be emphasized a little bit more, and in my mind that just made the scene a little bit better. Let's see here. People are talking about explosions at night. Yeah, that would be cool. And anyway, still again, people talking about driving and which side of the road they're on. All right, so anyway, so and again, kind of along the lines of the premise of scene composition is it's entirely up to you, right? This was my decision to put the camera like this, but you may go for a crane shot where you take the camera really high up and that wasn't really high up, but high up and oops, didn't mean to do that. High up and then just angle it down and stuff like that and go for more of a crane shot or whatever. But it's entirely up to you. This is just sort of what I chose and what I'm going to stick with. Now, that's kind of how I want my scene composed, right? And there's a lot that can be said about scene composition, and I kind of want to make this about unity, right? But I also kind of want to talk a little bit about the premise of scene composition, things like the rule of thirds and stuff like that. So how the car is at the lower third line of the screen, and now we have two sharp leading poles, both at roughly around the thirds, as well as this around the third. So it's going to give us, you know, a much more dynamic scene as opposed to the car just being right in the center of the screen and stuff like that, which would be boring and not work very well for your eye. So I know that we're talking about Unity, and that's really all just sort of, you know, standardized art stuff, but I felt it was worth mentioning. So anyway, so now let's talk about bringing a character in and kind of hitting upon the second point. So the first point was a little bit about scene composition, and the second point was about animation, right? And I think people are still fairly mystified or maybe intimidated by the Mechanim system. And it's, you know, for those who aren't used to working with it, it can be like, oh man, this is so confusing and this is so crazy. But really, it's actually really fairly simple. And it's really not all that difficult. And you're going to see that we're just going to sort of just drag and drop things, and they're just going to sort of work. And that's, to me, that's what's so awesome about the system. And once you kind of get the hang of it, it's actually a really great system to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my Ethan model. And he is down in the sample assets, third person character, models, and there's Ethan. And he's just the model. I'm just going to click and drag him and let go. Okay, and that's going to place him in my scene. And we'll see that basically he is the model. So he's got like his root materials and the skeleton systems and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into all that stuff. That's just modeling stuff. But then he also has just an animator. And that's the only thing that's really on him right now with this thing, apply root motion. Now, I don't really want to go like super in depth into all these different components because we actually have videos on unity3d.com/learn. Click the tutorials and go to animation. A lot of stuff is there, but I will talk a little bit about that so that we can get stuff going. One of the questions in chat: where can I download the sample assets? Just in Unity, so not in your web browser. In Unity, just go to Window Asset Store and just type sample in this little search bar. That'll take you right there. So there you go. Yeah, you can't download assets through your browser. You have to open Unity, which if you're in your browser, there should be a button that says something along the lines of like open in Unity, I think. But yeah, but you download assets through the actual editor. Yeah, you have to log in, and the login is free and stuff like that. So you need to log in to use the asset store, but there is a free, you can just log in, I mean, create a free account. It's the login button's in the upper right hand corner. Okay, so one question here: does Mechanim only work with rigged characters? So yeah, the character, well, no, the Mechanim works pretty much for anything. So I can use Mechanim to control animations on a camera. I can use Mechanim to control any form of animation. So no, the character doesn't have to be rigged. However, having a rigged character allows humanoid animations and things like that to just work, right? And I'll actually show you how that works. So here I have the Ethan model, and we can see that the model has no animations, and the rig is just automatically created. So Unity actually creates the rig on humanoid models for us if it can. The nice thing about that is that you can just make any humanoid model you want. You don't necessarily have to make the model a specific way or with, you know, any special knowledge in mind. Just make a humanoid model and rig it, or a humanoid model and give it like a skeleton, and Unity will sort of handle the rest there. So yeah, so it's Mechanim is not just for rigs, but rigs are actually really simple and whatever. So here we have Ethan, and I'm going to go ahead and place him where I want him, and where I'm going to place Ethan is -0.5 and -2.3, and this was just determined for me playing around with it. And I'm going to give him a Y rotation of 166. So if I look at my game view, that's kind of where he's at. Now, one of the most powerful things about the mechanism system I want to point out is that the animations that I'm going to apply to Ethan weren't made for Ethan. And that's actually what's really cool. Unity will handle the rig of Ethan in such a generic way that I can also program my animations generically, I can make my animations generically, and Unity will handle all the translations for us, kind of like our own little Rosetta Stone. All right, and so animations that weren't made for specific models will still just work on specific models. So I can take any humanoid model I want and apply the same animations to it, which is actually really, really, really cool. So here I have Ethan. He's positioned where I want, he's rotated where I want, and he has this animator component on him. And my animator component, I'm just moving out there. My animator component takes a few different things. It takes a controller, which is an animator controller, which it actually is a state machine that sort of drives this whole thing. It creates an avatar for me, so I didn't have to make that avatar, it just handled it for me, which is actually really nice. Apply root motion means that the root motion of the animation itself is going to drive Ethan, so I don't even need to worry about moving Ethan. I'm just going to apply animations that have root motion built into them, and he's going to move around, right, which is nice. Animate physics just basically means if I need to keep my animation in step with physics, which in this case I don't really care about that. And then culling mode is just when will it animate. Will it animate only if it's being drawn, or will it always animate? And I just leave that based on renders. I just leave that the way it is naturally. So if you want more information about that, always feel free to check out the documentation or the Learn tutorials. They go into much more detail about that, which, so that'll be, fairly helpful if you want more information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a controller for Ethan. So I'm just going to right click down in the project view and I'm going to create, and I'm going to select animator controller, which I'll just call Ethan's controller. Alright, and again I'll click on Ethan and I'll just click and drag Ethan's controller there, and so now this controller is linked to the animator component, which is linked to this model. Okay, so basically any changes I make to this controller will affect Ethan's model. Alright. One of the questions, do humanoid models have to have the same amount of bones to be able to use an animation from another model? No, absolutely not. So we want bones to sort of be placed the same way, but we can have extra bones and just ignore them. And as a matter of fact, since we're talking about it, let me come back here into the Ethan model. And let me just show you. I can click this configure. Oh, it's going to make me save the scene. Yeah, we'll save the scene. I can click configure, which will allow me just to specify which, so it'll show me all the bones that Unity needs, though Unity has a few optional bones that are the ones with the dashed line. It just allows me to choose which ones go to which, right? So I just get, it's basically drag and drop. I just get to drag and drop which bones go where, and that's that, right? So anyway, I'm digressing a bit here. I'm going more into mechanism than I really wanted to, but you get the idea. So there's not any real requirements. And if you want to know more, just check out our videos, because I do want to move on. So again, we have Ethan. Ethan has his avatar and this Ethan's controller. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this controller just by double clicking it, and I'm going to get this state machine. And currently the state machine is empty except for any state. And what I just want to do is I want to find my walking animation. So I'm going to go down here, again into sample assets, characters, and vehicle, third-person controller, go into animation, and I'm going to find a walk animation right here. Now this animation was not made for Ethan. It was made for some other mechanism model, but I'm just going to click and drag that on here. And we'll see that it turns orange, and that specifies that it is the default animation. It's just going to play automatically. And since I want Ethan to sort of walk like, like a big bad superhero, I'm going to slow the animation speed down to say 0.6, so it'll be 60%. And so he's just going to walk away now. Now what's really cool is that at this point, my animation's done, right? I mean, it seems like a lot of pieces, but really all I did was just create a controller, click and drag animation to the controller, and click and drag the controller onto the model, and that's it, right? And now what we get is we get Ethan walking away from the car. And what's cool about this is I didn't even have to like move Ethan. I didn't have to handle any locomotion script. I didn't write any scripts, right? I can do a lot of these transitions and things like that from different states inside my controller just by clicking and dragging different animations in and coming up with transitions. And again, really, if this piques your interest, go check out the documentation, go check out the videos. There's a lot of really cool stuff we can do. So real quick, I'm going to check the chat here. So there are standard assets. The sample assets are basically the updated standard assets, so I highly encourage you all to check them out. Can I make him walk like an Egyptian? I imagine I could make him walk like an Egyptian if I had an animation for it. That would be kind of cool. Like, a hero walks away from an exploding car in slow motion, but a real awesome hero, Egyptian, walks away from a car as it's exploding. Yeah, but anyway, I don't know. Egyptian walking is, what is that? That was an old dance or something like that. Anyway, I'm just, you guys are just getting me off topic now. You get the idea. So at this point, Ethan's walking away, right? And we haven't had to do a lick of code. This whole thing is actually rather simple and easy to create. So let's talk about the explosion now. All right. So I mean that's kind of an important part here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manage the explosion through an invoke statement and basically an instantiation statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to instantiate an explosion prefab, right? And it's going to be a very minimal amount of work because a lot of the work was already done in the explosion assets, which we downloaded for free. So I'll just right click in the project view and I'll click create C# script, and I'll call this explosion, we'll just say explosion car script. Oops, and I typed script with an R at the end there, so let me fix that. Come on, let me rename it. There we go. Okay, get rid of that R. And I will just double click it to open up our editor. So one of the questions is, can you do this with the camera as well? I assume you mean apply animations and stuff like that and control it with the animator, and the answer is yes. We can use an animator to have all sorts of different camera animations, which is really cool if you think about it. If I have a bunch of predefined camera animations, like move this way, move that way, go to this room, go to that room, I can just tell it to transition, and the camera will go to those places through the animations, and I can achieve actually really cool camera effects that way. So yes, this can be applied. All right, let's see. I do have a loud keyboard, so I do apologize for that. I apologize for that every chance I get. I have a mechanical keyboard, and it's loud. Some people like it, some people hate it. I apologize if you're one of the folks that hates it, but I like it, so sorry. All right, so we're going to make this real simple, right? There's a lot of more complex ways we can handle this, but really what I'm going to do is I'm just going to instantiate a game object for where the car is when I want my explosion to run. So I'm just going to type public game object, and I'm going to call this game object something along the lines of explosion. I could just call it object whatever. Now I don't need this update, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that update method. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a function void explode. So void explode, oops, there we go. And explode is actually really simple, all right? Basically what we're going to do is we are going to instantiate an explosion prefab, this explosion prefab, the one we're going to link up in the inspector, and then just destroy the car. And the illusion is going to be that the car exploded, right? The nice thing about writing scripts generically like this, for instance, having this public game object and having the instantiate, is that if I ever want to change my explosion later, it's real simple. I just click and drag a new explosion there, and I can put anything I want there. Really, I can put a rubber chicken model here, and the car will turn into a rubber chicken if I really wanted to. I don't know why I'd want to. Or maybe an explosion of rubber chickens, right? Maybe there's just too many rubber chickens in that car. But you get the idea. So programming it generically allows me to, maybe my art team will come up with a better explosion, and then later I can put that in, and right, and instead of just prototyping and stuff like that. Someone already mentioned to fix the class name. I've already done that. But yes, since I had a typo and had an R there, I did have to change it in here. So just keep that in mind. So real simply, I'm just going to say instantiate which is the function that I want, and I'm going to instantiate explosion. And it's going to ask me where I want to instantiate it, and I'm going to instantiate it at transform, and it's going to transform dot position, because I'm going to put this script on the car. So I want the explosion to appear where the car is, and then my my rotation is just going to be quaternion dot identity. Once the explosion has been instantiated, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to destroy this .game object. Now, I don't need the this. So someone's going to point out, you don't have to do this, you can just type game object, and you're absolutely correct. But I like it, so I'm going to do it, because I'm the one making the video. So, haha. Yeah, I mean, you don't need it, but as someone always points out, you don't need it, but I'm going to do it anyway, because it's just my style. Alright, and so what I want to do is I want this car to explode. Okay, I have a function to make it explode. I have my explosion variable right here. So all I need to do is tell it to explode. And some of the ways we can get that to happen is we can use coroutines or create our own timing information. And I mean, we can get as complex with this as we want. But really, a real simple way of doing it is by using the invoke function. So all I'm going to say is invoke, and then in quotes, I'm going to say explode, the name of my function. Right? And then it's going to ask me, when do I want it to explode? And I'll say 3. That's 3 seconds. Okay? So explode in 3 seconds. So in 3 seconds, this function will be called, the car will explode, and the car will go away, and we'll get our explosion. Okay? And so back in Unity, alright, back in Unity, I'm going to take this explosion script, and I'm just going to click and drag it onto my car, right there. And then, right now, if I do this, we're going to get an error. Right? Because I haven't provided an object to explode, right? So if I just run it, after 3 seconds, we'll get a red error in our console saying, hey, null reference, right? So I don't want that. So what I need to do is I need to provide it some game object. Now, I will tell you that I could, I mean, I honestly, look, I can do this. I can put ETH in there, and then after 3 seconds, we'll get another Ethan. Right? But that doesn't make any sense, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go into this detonator explosion framework that I showed you where I found it. I'm going to go to prefab examples, re-click my car, and I am going to look for detonator, where is it at? Where's the one I want? Detonator insanity. That's the fun one. Alright, so again, I'll grab my car and then I'll just click and drag the insanity, detonator insanity, and there it is. So now when I play it, after 3 seconds, the car will explode. Boom, right? And it has a really neat effect, and it looks fairly good. I would probably also want to instantiate maybe a scorched mark on the ground there, maybe some rubble of a car. I could certainly do that, but since I didn't have a busted up version of that Sky car, I just don't have it here. But if you ever wanted to expand upon that, you could certainly do that. So far so good, right? We have our car, it explodes, right? Cool. However, one very important part of the standard action movie is that when things explode, they explode in slow motion, right? And that is where the magic is, right? Everyone wants slow motion. Slow motion's the best, right? I remember when Max Payne came out and it had that bullet time, and then all of a sudden everybody was like, bullet time has to be in my game, and we have to have bullet time. And then there was The Matrix, and The Matrix had Neo dodging bullets in slow-mo, and all of a sudden everyone's like, bullet time is going to be in everything, right? Slow motion is in everything. So if you worked in if you worked in different systems like XNA or the old style of like just pure OpenGL programming, DirectX, or just working with a lot of low-level code, maybe Allegro, just straight up Win32 API if you really felt like it, or even older than that, slow motion was an effect that was a little bit harder to achieve because you had to come up with some method of timing your world. Luckily in Unity, it's actually fairly simple to do slow motion. Okay, we can just modify our time scale and make this whole thing very simple. So I'm going to create another script, and again, just another C# script, and what I'm going to do is I'll call this slow-mo script, which I'll spell weird, slow-mo, for slow motion. Alright. What is explosion polycount? I have no idea. It's an asset I downloaded, so I haven't explored it or anything like that. Can you drain the color as it slows? Absolutely. So if you have Unity Pro, there's a lot of camera effects and stuff like that. You can drain colors and we can do all sorts of stuff. Yes, Dead to Rights was another game that did that. Yeah, we can do all sorts of stuff. So, okay, so here I have my slow-mo script, and slow motion is actually also very, very simple. I'm simply going to create a function called void slow time, and inside slow time, I'm just going to type time.timescale, and I'll set that equal to, say, 0.4f, which will be 40%. And this is just a number that I found out ahead of time I liked. You know, again, it's one of those things that you can just sort of adjust however you want. But we have time.timescale at 0.4f, which means everything is going to be slowed down about 40%. Now, something that you're going to discover the hard way is that simply slowing down time is going to make your physics go weird. Now, granted, I'm not doing anything in this particular scene that uses physics, so it's not really a problem. But if you are using physics, you will want to make an adjustment, all right? You will make an adjustment to the time.fixed delta time so that your physics runs slower as well, so that things don't start behaving all sorts of weird on you, right? So you got to keep that balanced out. Now, luckily, like I said, I'm not doing any physics, so I don't need to do that. But that's just your warning. I don't want a bunch of emails later like, hey, I slowed down the time in my game and all of a sudden things went wacky, because you also have to do the fixed time scale as well to modify your physics. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Someone pointed out by saying 40%, it's going to be 60% slowed. You're correct. It's 40% of full speed. It will be slowed by 60%. My mistake. As someone else also pointed out, if I were to say 0 here, that effectively pauses the game. So fixed update won't run. Things will just stop, right? If I set my timescale to 0. So if you ever want to know how to just like stop everything in your scene, time.timescale.0 will do that. Though there's a few things in the time class that doesn't stop, so experiment and see if that works for you. Just, you know, just as a forewarning. All right. So next, what I want to do is I am going to say, sorry, I'm just reading chat here real quick. Yeah, so the F is to specify that it's a floating point number, so that Unity doesn't think it's a double or an int, depending on when. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to again call invoke, and inside my invoke function, I almost said invocation, which is not correct. I'm going to type in slow time, and then again I'll just call that after 3 seconds. And again, the F is not necessary here, right? Because I'm not using a decimal point, but I'm going to say F just so I know it's a float, just so there's no issues there. You don't have to have it, but it's a good idea. Let's see here. So one of the questions is, if I expect to use slow motion, should I always just multiply time.fixed delta time by time.timescale? So the rule of thumb is you always reduce them by the same amount. So if I reduce timescale to 0.4, I'd also reduce time.delta time to 0.4. So or by the same margin, whatever you have time.delta or fixed delta time set at, that's what you want. You want to reduce it by the same amount. So if I reduce it by 40% or to 40%, reduce it by 60%, I'll do the same to the other. All right. Anyway, invoke a spell, you magician. That's what I'm doing. I'm invoking slow time because I'm a magician. I'm a time magician. All right, so here we go. So after 3 seconds, we'll also slow time. And I can just come in here and hit play. And now what we'll see is after 3 seconds, not only will the car explode, but we'll go slow-mo. No, we won't, because I forgot to put the script on something. Whoops. Yeah. So I forgot to click and drag the script onto. I can put it on anything in the scene. I'm just going to put it on the camera. It doesn't have to be on the camera, but that's what I'm going to do. There's another lesson for you. Your scripts have to be on objects in the scene, or else they don't work. So yeah. So let's try that again. So now I will hit play. Now that's on my camera. The car will explode, and everything goes real slow. Even the explosions slow down. Everything's slowed down, and it's all nice and good. And Ethan looks all cool with his glasses on and everything. And at this point, I mean, you can just sort of play around. Like if I really wanted to go like super slow-mo with it and just type in a 0.1 there, you'll see, you know, I can play the scene again and have, you know, Ethan go real slow. I mean, it's an effect that however you want. You can see the shock wave, and I really should turn the sound back on as well, because we're Yeah, I should turn the sound back on as well so you guys can hear the explosion. I do want to point out, so this actually brings back to the point about physics that I spoke to. So watch real closely. I'm going to run this again. There's going to be little cubes that are thrown out. Watch how they kind of step, right? They're real glitchy, right? So they're not smooth. That's an effect of the physics that I was talking about, right? So they're jumpy. Because I slowed the time scale. So what I'd really want to do is I'd either want to change their physics calculations to interpolation, which would cause them to move smoothly, or I'll want to reduce the time scale. All right. So there's an option for you. So one more thing I want to show you. I mean, this is really kind of obvious, but I'm just going to create another function here, which I'll call resume time, and in which case I'll set time back to 1. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to invoke resume time after 5 seconds. So what will happen is we'll get the whole, the scene slows down as he's walking away from the explosion, and then after 2 more seconds it speeds back up. And let me turn the audio back on here, and we'll go ahead and run this. And one of the cool things about doing this with the audio is that even the audio gets slowed down, right? Which is a lot of fun. And then after 2 seconds he'll speed back up. And everything goes back to full speed. So anyway, that is kind of what I wanted to talk about with the scene composition here. Let me read through chat here real quick. Slow motion, okay. Sorry, I'm just reading. I hate the dead air while I'm reading chat, but I can't really talk while reading. Mike has a huge amount of icons pinned to his taskbar. Not a huge amount, just the stuff I use. Okay, here's a good question. So Renaf asked, if I put the script on the car, when it explodes, will the script go with it? Yes. So what'll happen is, it really depends on which one fires off first. But if the speed gets slowed and then the car explodes, then the script will go away, and it, well, no, I'm sorry, because it called an invoke, so I'm actually wrong there. So here, I'll show you. So we'll go ahead and put the slow-mo on the car itself. So the car has the explosion and the slow-mo. But since both of them get set to invoke ahead of time, even once the car explodes, they'll still fire off because they've been registered to be called again. No, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. He didn't speed back up. So no, since the car exploded and the script went with it, it doesn't get called back. So I am incorrect on that. I'm sure if it called a function of a different script, then that would work. But since that script no longer exists, no, it doesn't work. So we do not want to put this script on our car. So I apologize for that incorrect answer there. We need to have the script on something else, because once the car is destroyed, the script goes with it. So even though it does the callback, the script doesn't exist anymore, so there's no function to call. Let's see here. So no, it doesn't go back to normal speed, sort of to answer your question there. Let's see. How does that particle achieve that heat distortion shockwave? Well, I tell you what, just go ahead and download it and find out for yourself. I showed you where the asset is. It's free. Check it out. Let's see here. Are the 2 seconds extended as well because the time, I believe the 2 seconds are in fact extended to be longer because the time is slowed down. And time slowing down affects all of that. All right. Can you have super fast moving sky happening at the same time as a slow-mo explosion? Just as a weak example, no. You can't have two. Time scale is universal, but when you reduce the time scale, you could also speed up something else to make it keep going at a normal rate, even though everything else is slowed. Or you can just slow one thing or whatever you want to do. So, but there is only one time scale shared by everything. All right, so okay, so at this point, we're about 45 minutes in. So like I said, we finished early today. It wasn't a super intense session, but it's something that I just kind of wanted to talk about since it was something that I thought was neat, and I figured I'd show. So we can still do some questions and answers. Real quick, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this back up here. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever. Follow us on Twitter, at Unity3D, at Mike Geig, at Will Goldstone, or at The Ant Ranch. And while I'm talking about this, I do want to mention that 2 new live sessions have been scheduled, one for next Monday, one for the Monday after that. Next Monday is saving and loading data. So We'll look at serializing classes, we'll look at persisting data, we'll look at saving it out to a file and then loading it back in, which is something that people have been asking me a lot for, so I'm finally getting around to it, so sorry it took so long. And then after that, we'll talk about mobile development. So the next week after that is mobile development, so we're going to talk about accelerometer, setting up the Unity remote, we're going to talk about multiple input or multiple touches on your screen, things like that. All right. So I'll bring this back down here. So I just wanted to throw those out there while I was thinking about them. Those are coming up. So some of the other questions, make the screen shake. The screen shake is easy. I just apply a script to the camera that modifies or just rotates it randomly, right? And the screen will just go nuts. Let's see here. How would you transition from one camera to another? I don't know what you mean by transition. If you mean a slow fade, that's a really good question. I'm not sure that you can. However, if you just want to move from one camera to the next, all you really need to do is just disable one and enable the other. Or watch my camera video where I talk about the viewport and stuff like that, and you'll see how we can modify, change the depth of one camera to get it to appear over another camera. So that's actually really simple to do. But yeah, so check out my camera video on that. Can we ramp the timescale over time? Absolutely, we can speed things up. Let's see here. Sorry, chat's kind of going nuts here, so I'm trying to read it all. Can I add load screen or start video in Unity? Yes, you can. Will Goldstone is awesome. I agree. Let's see here. Make the camera shake when the car explodes. Yeah, maybe here in a second. It's simple. So we'd probably want to use like a sine wave to do that, so that it wasn't completely random, so that it shook back and forth. But yeah, I can show you kind of a random way of doing it. I don't math particularly well on the fly, so I'd want to, for a proper example, I'd want to look up the sine function. Let's see here. No more player prefs as of next week. So next week we'll still talk about player prefs. It still has its place, but we're going to talk about some other stuff as well. There's always a video per week, most of the time. Sometimes there won't be. Like I'm going to GDC this year, so in a couple of weeks there won't be a video, that sort of thing. Sorry, I'm still reading chats. Let's see. Okay, so everyone is pretty much just suggestions and talking about next week, except for one call for me to talk slower. Sorry, I get excited and I talk fast. That's why we record it, so you can always just go back and watch again. But I mean, how can I not talk fast when I'm making things explode? I mean, that's just one of those things. You get excited, you know. 2D top down, yeah, maybe we can do a session on 2D top down here eventually. Anyway, okay, so at this point, so the questions have sort of devolved into some other things, it seems. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up now, and I'll stay on chat. You guys can continue to chat with me, and I'll answer any questions there, but we'll go ahead and end the video feed. So again, thank you all very much for attending. Sorry this one went a little short, but those of you on your lunch break, I'm sure you don't mind. And thanks again for watching. I'll see you all next week, and have a pleasant week.